Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Since Chloe was born, Mark felt like he had gained a new heart outside his chest. She was the one who filled his days with joy, curious questions, unexpected laughter, and a sweetness that was hard to explain. She was the daughter every father would dream of having. They had a relationship that went beyond the basics. They were confidants. He knew when something was bothering her even before she said a word. And for years, it worked like this: she trusted, he supported, and together they overcame any difficulty. But, lately, there was something different in her gaze. A kind of silence that wasn't usual. And that silence began to grow. Chloe, at 16, had always been communicative. She had strong opinions, laughed easily, and even when something upset her, she would end up venting. Only in the past few weeks, she had distanced herself. She would come home from school, go straight to her room, and make excuses to avoid any kind of conversation. Mark tried to strike up a conversation, talking about some show they both knew by heart or a song they used to listen to in the car, but she responded little. She would look at him for short moments and then look away, as if she were somewhere else. He thought it might be some teenage issue, maybe a boy, maybe a fight with friends, or insecurity about her own body. He knew that phase was full of ups and downs. But even trying to rationalize, his heart ached. Family dinners, which used to be moments of jokes and small talk, became heavy. Chloe ate quickly and always said she needed to study. When she was on the couch, she said she was sleepy. When he asked if everything was okay, she smiled. And that was the detail Mark noticed: the smile was forced. He even thought about asking directly if someone had hurt her. Part of him considered something more serious but decided not to create paranoia. He thought it was better to wait, give her space, trust that when she was ready, she would come to him. But as time passed, the void between them grew. And it consumed him. One night, after she went to bed, Mark found himself looking at a photo he kept on the shelf, a picture of the two of them at the beach, laughing as if the world were light. He remembered the sand sticking to her legs, the crooked glasses, the way she hugged him. It all seemed so recent, but now it felt distant. He wondered what he had done wrong, if he had failed somewhere along the way, if he should have insisted more on conversations or respected her silence less. He felt powerless. The most important person in his life was suffering, and he didn't know how to reach her. But Mark was her father. And even without answers, even without understanding the reason for that silent pain, he knew he would keep trying. Because giving up on Chloe never crossed his mind. What he didn't know was that the truth was about to arrive. And when it did, it would turn his world upside down. Mark left work early by chance. An appointment had been cancelled at the last minute, and he thought about taking the opportunity to pick up something for dinner and spend some time at home. He parked the car, grabbed the bags from the back seat, and as he approached the door, he heard a muffled cry. That made him stop. It was a low sound, muffled, but he recognized that voice. It was Chloe. He put everything aside and looked for her. He saw his daughter sitting on the porch steps, huddled, her face hidden between her arms. Her chest rose and fell with difficulty, as if she were trying to control a pain that had already gone beyond limits. He approached slowly and asked what had happened. She took a long time to respond. She tried to breathe between sobs, fidgeted with her fingers, as if searching for words that were still stuck in her throat. Mark didn't push. He just stayed there, close enough for her to feel she could talk, but without pressuring her. After a few minutes of silence and tears, she lifted her face. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling, her expression weighed down by a burden that seemed too heavy for such a young body. And that's when she began to tell him. She said everything had happened the previous week. She was coming back from school, taking a different route. That's when she saw a familiar car parked on a quiet street, 2 blocks from home. It was her mother's car. She found it strange and approached quietly. When she got closer, she saw the two occupants. Her mother and Professor Dawson. They were kissing. A long, intimate kiss, as if they were longtime lovers. Chloe froze. She didn't know what to think or what to feel. She said time seemed to stop in that moment. The professor was someone she knew, he was in her classroom every day, and there, right before her eyes, he shared intimacy with her mother, as if nothing else existed around them. Jennifer seemed calm, smiling, touching his face tenderly. Chloe stood there, unseen, just watching the scene, as if watching her own reality collapse. After a few seconds, she ran. She got home and stayed locked in her room the rest of the day, digesting it all in silence. Since then, she had been trying to figure out what to do with that information. She tried to forget, tried to act as if it were a nightmare that would pass, but every time she looked at her mother, she felt a mix of confusion and anger. And every time she entered the history classroom, her stomach turned. She felt betrayed, exposed, dirty. And worse, afraid. Afraid to speak, to provoke a fight, to be blamed for destroying the family. So she chose silence, even though that silence was destroying her inside. Mark listened to everything in silence. He felt each word as if they were punches. But he kept his gaze steady on her, trying to convey security, even though inside he was falling apart. When she finished, he pulled his daughter into an embrace. She cried into his shoulder, hard. He felt her body trembling. And even though he didn't yet know what he would do, he knew what he needed to say right then, at that moment. He told her she wasn't alone. That he believed her. That he would do whatever was necessary to understand what was happening. And that, above all, she was his priority. That calmed her heart a little. For the first time in days, Chloe allowed herself to breathe deeply. Mark stayed with her until her eyes closed from exhaustion. Mark spent the night thinking about the woman he loved, the one he had shared his life with for so many years, who now was a huge question mark. And the professor, the same one he had greeted at school meetings, now had a face that burned like an insult. But he knew that before making any decision, he needed certainty. He needed proof. And that would come soon. What he still didn't imagine was how much that search for the truth would change everything. Not only his relationship with Jennifer, but also with his daughter, who now needed him more than ever. The next morning, Mark woke up with his head full of questions. He wanted to believe that everything was a big misunderstanding, a misinterpretation, an absurd coincidence. But Chloe's gaze from the night before, the tone of her voice, the way she trembled as she spoke, there was no room for doubt. He needed concrete certainty, needed to confront the facts with the clarity of someone who, even betrayed, still thinks clearly. And that's why, after dropping Chloe off at school, he stopped the car on the corner and sat there for a few minutes staring at the steering wheel, until he dialed the number of an old acquaintance. A childhood friend who had become a private investigator. Mark always thought he'd never need a service like this, but life sometimes takes us down unthinkable paths. And now, this was the only way out. He explained what he knew and what he suspected. He asked for absolute discretion. The detective was straightforward. He said he would need 7 days, maybe less, to bring something concrete. Mark didn't ask how he would do it, or where he would install cameras or microphones. He trusted the man's professionalism. And at that moment, he needed to trust someone. The following days dragged on. While Jennifer acted normally at home, preparing breakfast, folding clothes, asking trivial things, Mark could barely look at her for long. Every gesture of hers now seemed choreographed. Every smile felt out of place. He pretended a calmness his body didn't feel. He slept poorly, ate little, and all the while looked at Chloe with a mix of pain and pride. His daughter had carried the weight of the truth alone for a whole week. And still, she endured. That said a lot about her. On the 7th day, the detective sent a message. It simply said, "I have everything. Can we meet in person?" Mark felt his stomach churn. He visited the man's house that night. He received an envelope. Inside, there were printed photos and a USB drive. The first image was enough to take his breath away. Jennifer, holding hands with Professor Dawson, smiling as they entered a motel at 2 in the afternoon on a random Wednesday. Other photos showed meetings in cafes, inside the car, more kisses, more touches. And dates that matched her lunch hours, the days she said she was handling work matters. The evidence was there, cold, direct, leaving no room for excuses. Mark silently thanked him, paid for the service, and left driving, unsure if he felt angrier or more devastated. When he got home, he saw Jennifer on the couch watching TV. He went upstairs, took a long shower, put on a random t-shirt, and came back down with the envelope in hand. He sat across from her and simply handed it over. She opened it, looked at it, and by the third photo, her eyes started to fill with tears. Her hands trembled. She tried to speak, but her voice faltered. When she finally managed to say something, it was a mix of justification and confession. She said she had been feeling lonely. That Mark spent too much time away. That she needed to be heard. That the professor appeared unexpectedly, at a time when she felt invisible. He remained silent. Just observing. With every word, he felt like he was seeing someone else in front of him. The woman he loved, the mother of his daughter, now seemed like an unfamiliar character he had never truly known. As the confession unfolded, Chloe appeared in the hallway. She stood still, listening to every sentence her mother spoke. The girl didn't say anything. She just locked eyes with her. And that was enough for Jennifer to completely break down. She tried to approach her daughter, but Chloe stepped back. She firmly said she didn't want to hear anything else. She went upstairs to her room without looking back. The silence left in the living room was suffocating. Mark kept his composure outwardly, but internally everything felt ablaze. His firm face hid the whirlwind. Then he raised his eyes and spoke in a low but firm voice, "You destroyed our family for a whim. You chose to hide, betray, deceive, instead of coming to me. And worst of all, you involved our daughter in this nightmare." He didn't yell. He let each word out with the weight of someone who had loved deeply and been deeply hurt. Disappointment was visible in his eyes, more than any anger. "I'm not perfect, but I've always been here. And you threw it all away as if it meant nothing." After that, he stood up and said she knew where the door was. There was no more discussion, no goodbye. Just the end. Jennifer understood that she had lost more than a marriage. She had lost her daughter's trust. She got up, went to the bedroom, packed a small suitcase, grabbed the car keys, and left. Mark didn't follow her. He stayed seated, staring at the empty envelope on the table. That night, Chloe came downstairs to get a glass of water. She found her father still awake, sitting on the couch, the TV turned off. She approached, rested her head on his shoulder, and the two stayed there, without saying anything. For the first time since everything began, there was a moment of peace. There was still pain, still unanswered questions, but at that moment, they were together. And that was already a start. 2 days after Jennifer's departure, Mark woke up determined. He couldn't shake the image of the professor involved with his wife, nor Chloe's expression hearing everything from the hallway. It still burned. He looked at the folder where the photos and report were stored, took a deep breath, and turned on the computer. He wrote a direct email, without beating around the bush, addressed to the school's administration. He attached the evidence, explained the facts clearly, and requested a formal investigation. He ended by saying that, as the parent of a student, he wouldn't tolerate a professional in education maintaining this kind of behavior with the mother of a student, jeopardizing the school environment. When he clicked send, he felt as if he had lifted a weight off his shoulders. It wasn't for revenge, it was for justice. And, above all, for Chloe. The school's response was quick. That same afternoon, Mark received a call from the coordinator. She thanked him for the information, confirmed receipt of the material, and informed him that Professor Dawson had been suspended pending immediate investigation. 2 days later, another email arrived. In it, the school officially announced the professor's dismissal due to conduct incompatible with professional ethics. They also guaranteed that a committee would be formed to review internal protocols and that the administration was committed to the safety and respect of all students. Mark read the message with relief. He didn't smile, but he felt he had done the right thing. Handing over that evidence didn't erase the pain of betrayal, but it was a necessary step to prevent anyone else from being hurt in the same way. Chloe learned about the professor's dismissal online. A classmate sent her the link to the news that was already circulating among parents' groups. She read it all in silence, then went to her father and asked if he had been responsible. Mark didn't lie. He said yes. He explained the reasons, said it was about protecting her dignity, the environment where she studied, and his integrity as a father. Chloe hugged her father tightly, without saying anything. It was the first time in weeks that she showed this kind of spontaneous affection. And that, for Mark, was more than enough. In the days that followed, the house settled into a new rhythm. There were still moments of silence, especially during the times when Jennifer used to be present. But it was a different kind of silence from the one of recent times. It was a silence that brought calm, not confusion. Mark reorganized their routine, adjusted his work hours to drop off and pick up Chloe from school, and started cooking with her at night. They chose simple recipes, some went wrong, but laughter returned. Little by little, the two began creating a new way to live together. Nothing seemed like before, but there was something new there. A care that grew in the small things. Chloe started talking again about her future plans and even mentioned a writing contest she wanted to enter. She said the theme was, "What is courage?" and that maybe she had something to say about that. The divorce came weeks later, discreetly and without disputes. Jennifer, already regretful and quieter than ever, decided not to fight over anything that might create more conflict. She said she preferred to see Mark and Chloe continue living in the house, that she didn't want to take her daughter's home away, and that keeping the old apartment they had bought together, the one they once planned to use as an investment rental, would be enough for her to start over. Mark accepted, not out of generosity, but because he wanted to end things with dignity. As for Professor Dawson, he didn't stay with Jennifer. After the scandal, no school wanted to hire him again, and he had to move to another city, where no one knew him. Everyone left Mark, but only some understood the real weight of the choices they made. Jennifer tried to reconnect a few times. She sent messages, asked if they could talk. Mark replied formally. He said contact should be made via email and only if it concerned their daughter. Chloe, on the other hand, chose silence. She read her mother's messages but didn't reply. She still couldn't deal with the image that was etched in her memory. For her, forgiveness was a long road, and that point on the road was still far away. Mark didn't interfere. He gave his daughter space to decide how she wanted to handle her mother. He knew forcing premature forgiveness could be crueler than absence. Time passed. Wounds healed slowly. And one day, when he least expected it, Chloe came home from school with an envelope. It was the approval letter for the contest. She had won. The text spoke about a father who became shelter when everything collapsed. Who didn't raise his voice, who chose the truth, and stood firm when the world fell apart. Mark read the essay sitting at the table, his eyes misty. Chloe, without saying a word, watched him. When he finished, he looked at his daughter and simply said, "You saved me too." And in that moment, both understood that what they had built together was stronger than any lie. Because some truths, when faced with courage, transform pain into strength and disappointment into an eternal bond. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.